Wow, I love the energy from the video and really excited to have everyone here today. Welcome. Thank you for joining the Thinking with Leaders event series. My name is Yenny and I'm from the Google Cloud team based in Singapore. Please also let us know that you're here by filling out the form in the event description below or by scanning the QR code on the top right-hand corner. We encourage you to hashtag your social media post with hashtag Thinking Leaders to join the conversation and share your thoughts on the event. So, what is Thinking with Leaders? Thinking with Leaders is a series of YouTube live events created as a platform for industry leaders to discuss the diversity of experiences and philosophies around leadership, culture, career progression, and more. Through this series, we would like to support, elevate, and celebrate all in technology. And we're glad to have all of you as a part of the community today. The discussion today will be focused on leading in a remote world, how to foster connection and lead with empathy. After the discussions, you will have an opportunity to ask the participants questions through the YouTube live chat box. So feel free to let us know if you have questions. Let me introduce our moderator for the day, Hema Gokal. Hema is from the Lean In organization and is a dynamic and passionate leader who is committed to social responsibility. And we thought she would be the perfect moderator for our session today, alongside the three other influential leaders we have from the industry. Over to you, Hema.
Thank you, Yenny, for the warm welcome and opportunity to moderate the discussion today. And wherever you are in the world, thank you for joining us. COVID-19 is reshaping our lives in ways we could never have imagined. At Lean In, we've been conducting research on how the pandemic is impacting people's lives, in particular for women. With increased responsibilities at home and at work and limited support to manage the change, I'm personally very interested to hear from some of our industry leaders today. How are they leading during this time? What are they doing to support their teams? And what can we learn from them as they navigate this, as we ourselves navigate this time? I'm Hema Gokal, and it is a pleasure to introduce our three amazing leaders today. We have Arika Allen, Cecily Ng, and Heather Emslie. A warm welcome to you all. So I would love for you all to introduce yourselves. So Heather, would you like to go first?
Hi, I'm Heather Emslie. I'm the APAC lead for Google Cloud G Suite business. My role is fundamentally to help customers transform the way that they work in terms of collaboration and productivity. Thank you. Great to be here.
Thank you, Heather. Cecily?
Hello, thank you, Hema. My name is Cecily Ng. I'm the General Manager for Singapore at Salesforce. I've just celebrated my 10 years anniversary at Salesforce last month, so it's quite a journey. I joined the company as an individual sales manager, and many of the clients that was beginning with me is still our clients. So I'm really happy with that. So really good to be here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Cecily. And Arika?
Hi, I'm so happy to be here with you ladies today to talk about this subject, which is I'm really passionate about. My name is Arika Allen. I'm a managing director in the Accenture strategy practice, focusing on talent and organization. And my role is about helping clients navigate disruption, accelerate transformation, and build the talent that they need as the world of work evolves.
Great, thank you all. So we know these are unprecedented times. What routines and practices have you embedded in your organizations to help you lead and manage remotely and also lead with empathy? And Cecily, would you like to take that question first?
Sure. And Hema, you're right that this is really unprecedented in many ways. And for the kind of past 10 years of, my personal career life, I used to live, in a suitcase and, traveling around, and I get so exhausted. It's exciting, but it's exhausting to be flying around. And I think I now realize how exhausting it is to not fly around. And I think this working from home arrangement has actually elongated our working hours. So I think everybody on this call has never worked so hard in their life in the past 6 months. So it's really important topic that, we lead as a leader differently. So one of the things I think when this pandemic started at Salesforce, what the company did is to launch this initiative called the Can Be Well, because we know that many of our employees were hit with this sudden change. They may be impacted either personally or, with the family. So it's really important that, we know how our employees are doing. So this program is really focused on the employee safety, wellness, and mental health. And so we partner with companies like Thrive Global to come up with programs that really, help our employees to handle stress and burnout. And we do a wellness survey that reach out to, almost 50,000 employees around the world to make sure that they're okay. And then we pay for meditation classes, and that's open to the employees, also to the family. So that's the first thing we did as a company. And then, like you say, as a leader, it's really important, especially now how managers show up in this time, which is leading through empathy, I think leading through trust and gratitude. And so we all know it's super challenging for us to carry on our daily work without, the corridor catch up, the connect, with each other, teaming and brainstorming, and to get to whatever KPI set by the company. If for us, we are in sales, how do I get to the KPI, without the ability to meet the clients and the partners? So redefining success by the leadership team is important so that people know that they are still successful, maybe in a different way. And gratitude is becomes super important. And, for someone to perform under challenging circumstances, I think we leaders have to go out of our way to find ways to recognize people for what they've done. And then last but not least, just simple thing that I do, nothing, super difficult, is that we get so exhausted looking at screens every day. And it's a big temptation to switch off the camera. But I think it's so important for leaders to be present now. So I always turn on my camera, and, I hope that, other people in the call will do the same. Then you can watch out for the non-verbal clues, the expression, the language, what's the situation at home, any signs of disengagement. It is really hard to not be distracted in this environment, but I think it's important to be present.
Thank you, Cecily. Some great insights there. And Heather, what about you? What routines and practices have you embedded?
So I want to start off by saying for the past 6 years, I've actually been working in a semi-remote world, running an APAC business. I've been used to doing continuous back-to-back conference calls on a daily basis, but never for this type of period. So for me, it was a somewhat familiar kind of modus operandi for work, but it wasn't for my team. My team were used to face-to-face connections, walking in the office, connecting with the various sales teams that they work with. So I had to think about, how do I make it comfortable for them, and what were the things that I wanted to do? So there were 3 key things that I did. So firstly was getting the team settled. We were fortunate that Google gave a grant to allow people to buy furniture and screens and things to make their home life comfortable. But that actually wasn't enough. A lot of it also had to do with the work environment. So many people didn't have an office space. Some were working in their homes, in their bedrooms, because that was the only place that they could do it. Mm-hmm. And one of the things was really about making them feel comfortable, that was okay. And like Cecily said, is encouraging video and making it okay that if there was a messy cupboard or a bookshelf behind, it was okay to be in that environment and making people really comfortable. The other was around, in terms of settling people in, was there were new family responsibilities that came in. There was homeschooling, but there were also other scenarios where people suddenly had to lean into family businesses, and making sure that, one, I understood that situation by asking the question and getting to know what the bigger situation was. And then also ensuring that they had time to actually address those needs and family responsibilities. The second area was keeping my team connected. We're a close-knit team who connect quite frequently, but this kind of put a new dynamic into the team. So there were a couple of things that I had to put in place. Firstly, on a one-to-one basis, when people started pinging me, whether it was on chat or on email for responses that could have been addressed in a 5-minute conversation, I encouraged us to have a quick call. And the reason the call versus the text response was to bring in that personal element and also make sure that people felt a little bit more like the corridor conversations that you would have in the office, etc. So that was on a one-to-one basis. On a more group basis, I introduced a bi-weekly call with no agenda where the team got on, and literally I didn't speak, or I tried not to. And the team shared their experiences. Each person was going through a different dynamic, whether it was complete isolation or working at home, homeschooling. So people started sharing things that they were doing or things that they had started cooking and things like that. So it helped bring the team together on a more personal level. On a broader organizational level, we moved our all hands, which was typically a quarterly event, to weekly. This allowed us as a leadership team to connect in with our teams, share some of the wins and the excitements, but also communicate, because information was coming at a rapid pace and email just wasn't sufficient to address that. So that was the second one, was really about keeping teams connected. The third area, and for me, one of our most important, was keeping our customers connected and ensuring that they were able to operate as much as was in our control. So from that perspective, it was, one, making my teams feel comfortable managing in a remote environment. So encouraging them just to reach out to their customers, not to sell, but to find out if there was anything we could do to ensure that their transition to a work from home or remote work was available to them. Those that weren't using solutions, there were some solutions that we could help them with at no cost. So really keeping connected with our customers. I also reached out to those executives that I know to ensure that there were things that I could do to help them as well. So those three things: settling the team, keeping connected to the team, and then keeping connected with my customers.
That's great. Thank you, Heather. And, you've talked a lot about connection there. So, Arika, to you, how are you helping to build and foster connections during these times within your organization? And have there been any challenges that you've faced?
Yeah, these have definitely been challenging times. Now at Accenture, we're a global company and we have worked on distributed teams for some time and have the habit of connecting digitally. But the sudden shift to 100% work from home was something that we needed to, adopt and adapt to. And in my team, I worked with the team to make sure that we were adapting some traditions as well as developing new routines. So in terms of adapting traditions, some examples are, we recently had a 2-year celebration of the team being together. So we did a virtual celebration with packages delivered with drinks and other treats. We had, similar to, a pub type of atmosphere on the video call, even with quizzes of the senior leadership, et cetera, video on. And, the goal was to really make it interactive and not too businessy, but just replicate some of that feeling that you get when you're with the team face to face. During this time, I believe that recognition of team efforts is really critical, as Cecily mentioned earlier. So in our normal cadence of weekly meetings within our team, we have a carrot, and the carrot moment is really about recognizing a special individual on the team that week that has made a contribution. And we move that to a digital carrot during our team meetings. And whoever is recognizing comes up with goes to find a funny GIF and puts that in the chat. And, we use that moment to recognize and celebrate everyone's hard work for the week. Mm-hmm. In terms of developing new routines, I've definitely advocated for more video on time. I've had more informal live catch-ups with people, like, Heather was mentioning earlier. In my team, we've also done COVID care packages tailored to the individual. So a couple people have cats, so they got cat treats and human treats, and that was really nice to just extend that level of additional personalization. And something that we have is virtual water cooler chats, no agenda, just connect as if we are really in the office all together. And I would also say that there have been some new routines that have been created that are sort of old school routines. I've had a couple interns on my team, and they've actually handwritten letters, those things that come in the post, to say, thank you, and something that we can keep and recognize, even though we haven't necessarily worked with them physically, over this past 6 months. And that's really been a nice touch and something new and different to maintain connections.
That's great. Thank you, Arika. And so coming on to the next question, Heather, what are you most proud of overcoming during this time?
So the past 6 months have definitely been challenging, but I think one of the key things that I'm proud of doing was onboarding a new team member. Onboarding, Google as an organization puts a lot of emphasis on onboarding and making sure that people assimilate to the brand and that we have a great start, because that sets the tone for a person's journey along with the organization. For me personally, it's also really important because it helps people get up and running as quick as possible if you spend the time up front. So when I was faced with this challenge of onboarding someone, I was like, how am I going to do this? He's in Australia. I've never met him personally. I don't have that personal connection with the individual. So there were a couple of things that I looked at doing, and Google had a formal onboarding process. So a lot of the in-person events, like the Noogla onboarding, that went digital. So they did that. Our HR and tech team were amazing. Laptops were delivered with a gift bag. So they did a lot to help support me as a manager. But there still was the actual job function and building that connection and rapport with the individual. So what I did is I doubled down. I did daily calls with this person. I also set daily and weekly goals where they had to help make them feel like they were adding impact and had things to do. I got the team involved. They were doing, on each day, each person had an intro meeting with him. They could talk about whatever, whether it was the job, whether it was their experience at Google, etc. So really just starting to form those bonds. But then also there was the customer engagement. He's a sales guy. He's a relationship guy. How does he build that connection with customers he's never met? And he is needing to show impact. So there were a couple of scenarios where I had been working directly with some of our customers. So I worked with him. I introduced him into the accounts, gave him areas and opportunities to lead that had impact for the customer and impact for the business. And that seems to have helped him from just feeling confident and feeling a lot more impactful. It's 3 months down the line. He has closed one of his first deals, even in these times. And I think that gave him a confidence boost. Confidence boost, sorry about that. And then moving forward, I think what I'm going to do just as we continue is really encourage teams to, well, one, double in and make sure that there is more of a regular contact period and that we are supporting each other during this journey. It's not only the manager and the new team member, it's about the community to do it too.
That's great. Thank you, Heather. And Arika, how about you? What are you most proud of overcoming during this time?
I think we've all got varied situations that we're dealing with. And to be absolutely frank, personally, I'm just proud of coming out of this alive, gaining more emotional resilience and unfortunately a couple COVID kilos. The biggest obstacle for me has been balancing living in my office on one hand and being a single parent to an energetic 8-year-old on the other hand. Cecily mentioned earlier that we're working harder than ever, and I totally agree with that, and I feel the same way. The work demands have been unprecedented during these times, and being digital and remote and working remotely has provided more accessibility and more time to focus on work. You don't have to spend time on commuting. You're more able to connect with teams, so it's very easy to squeeze more meetings into the day, in theory. And for me, the challenge has been, around switching off. Plus, at the same time, also parenting, homeschooling, creating a sense of routine and safety, for my daughter when most of my support network of extracurricular activities disappeared during the circuit breaker when we were all sort of working from home. So for me, I've had to do more and recognize that I clearly can't do it all at the same time. So for me, I've just had to be really more deliberate in prioritizing, with the hard decisions and reminding myself to focus on, answering the questions, what will have the most impact? And if I say yes to this, what am I giving up? And making sure that I can feel comfortable with the decisions that I'm making every day as I manage the balance.
Great. Thank you, Arika. And Cecily, how about you? What are you most proud of overcoming?
Yeah, well, this is actually one of the questions that came out in our all hands meeting. So it's very hard to pick, but I think there were two things that stood up. One for me is customer related. So I don't know whether you read in a Straits Time, but there was a story about when pandemic hit, a lot of Singaporeans or people trying to come back to Singapore or dependent of Singaporeans, and so EDB was literally flooded, from queries around the world, and they were telling a story that luckily they implemented Salesforce before the pandemic hit without knowing, of course, and how the system enabled a very small team to help so many Singaporeans. And I read it in Straits Time. The customer didn't tell me. And that was like the proud moment that, like something that you did actually make a difference. And usually, salespeople, we celebrate when, we close the deal. But this is, I think, the proudest moment because you actually see the customer getting result. And then similarly, I think secondly is the amount of hustle and resilience from the team, and I mean they always hustle, right? We're in Asia, so hustling is normal. But I think the level of hustling and resilience and creativity in this time from the team, I think I'm super proud. Like nobody is backing down and say, okay, I can't do this because of this, but people are like, hey, how about we do this? So that's what I'm super proud of the team.
Oh, that's great. So, I know that we do have a lot of questions coming in from the audience as well, but I'd really like to, focus on what are some of the learnings you've had during this time, and what advice or tips do you have for our audience today to help them build and foster connections and lead with more empathy? And let's take word. Heather, would you like to go first?
Yeah, sure. So I think one of the key things is about learning and setting some boundaries. I'll be upfront. I'm not the best person for work-life balance. I love what I do. I don't have hours, and it kind of escapes me. But one of the things, I've created my non-negotiables during this period of time. And they're two non-negotiables. So it's my mornings. And that's really, I have 40 minutes to an hour that I walk my dogs. It's my gadget-free hour. I get to hit the streets of Singapore with my two dogs, and just my mind can wander and do whatever. So I've not except when it rains, but we find other ways. But that has been my one non-negotiable. The other has been really about having dinner at home. I travel a lot. So at 6 o'clock, I go downstairs. We eat dinner fairly early. I go downstairs and I make sure that for that 45 minutes, we sit at the table as a household and we discuss the day. No gadgets. Well, sometimes I'm bad, but it's my time with the house, my husband and Rosie, just to kind of reflect on the day, etc. After that, I may go work, or I may watch TV or read or do something like that. But those have become my two non-negotiables that I don't budge on during this time. And I think it's important for people to have those.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really crucial to take time out for yourself during this time, especially. Arika, how about you?
I would say for me, it's just remembering that sometimes the smallest things have the biggest meaning. So, take that time to stay connected with people, check in with colleagues, pick up the phone, do those informal video chats to maintain, connections with your colleagues and mentors. But at the same time, enjoy the small moments, with family. One of the things that I've done as a result of this circuit breaker, created a couple new traditions, sushi Fridays and balcony brunches. Sometimes the small things can just really have bigger meaning.
Oh, absolutely. And Cecily, how about you? What are some of the learnings you've had, and what advice do you have for our audience today?
Well, I don't know whether it's advice, but I think what have worked really well, and I think the disclaimer is that this is a pandemic for most of us. It's certainly the first for me, and I think for a lot of us, there's not a playbook that you can go to and say, okay, this is what I do now. Right. But I think a lot of the leaders, they're doing kind of similar things. So I think similar to what Heather mentioned, they've moved the, like a quarterly all hands, or it's monthly to weekly. So our CEO, Mark Benioff, did something very similar. And so he did two things. He changed it to weekly, where it's for all his leadership to join. And I was so impressed because he has not missed one. So It's every week. It's a big time commitment, but he kind of just re-emphasized that employees are most important. I want to make sure you know what is in my mind, the leadership mind. I want to make sure that you understand what we're doing at this time, how we are, pivoting to customers. What's the company strategy? And I think that I have taken that to learn that over communication is important, and it's really helpful when you have a large organization. But on the other hand, I think a lot of us also experience the non-stopping calls, and the human tendency is, I'm going to accept this call, since we'll do it, and our day becomes super long, and it kind of encroach into our private space. So I think it's also important to give while the intent is good to over communicate and connect, I think it's important to give employee the permission to not attend some of these calls, so that they can do whatever that they need to do. They can take care of some of the new responsibilities at home. Like Arika, if you have to look after the children with no support system, you need to take time to do that. So I think it's a balance between the need to connect and the need to permission to switch off.
Absolutely. I think we're all trying to achieve balance somehow. But this brings me nicely onto the first question from our audience. And Heather, this is going to be for you. How can we build trust in management during work from home, and specifically when the market is down and sales are tight?
Great, thank you. Thanks for the question. So I think there have been a lot of nuggets in terms of what you've heard from the leaders today. Things like gratitude and celebrating success. I think in these tough times, even the smallest achievement is really important to celebrate, and share that broadly amongst the team. Show that just doing something as opposed to doing nothing is important, and it keeps morale high. So I think celebrating that success, redefining what success looks like. Not everyone is going to be able to meet sales targets. So what are the things that are within their control that they can do in this period of time versus just giving up? So I think those are some of the things that I would encourage people to do, but also then take the time to listen, hear, and see what you can do within your control.
Absolutely. Thank you, Heather. And we have another question from the audience. Arika, this is for you. What is the best career advice you've received and how is it helping you during this time?
So I think for me, the best career advice and that I continually go back to is find mentors and be a mentor. And I think particularly during this time, I've had to sort of tap onto some of my mentors in ways that I may not have had to do during normal times because there's no pandemic playbook. So, having the ability to tap into other people's experience and advice on how to manage and get through has been really valuable for me. And I think that the flip side of mentorship is to make sure that you're taking time to mentor others and help to develop the junior people on your team and in your network. And I've made time to do that as well, the informal calls and connections, just to check in and see how people are doing and how we can, how I can guide them and help them advance. And I think during this time, it's really important to just have and maintain those personal connections as well.
That's great. Thank you, Arika. We have another one from the audience. Cecily, for you. How do you redefine success without impacting outcomes that the organization wants to achieve?
Thank you so much for the question. So I think, we all kind of adjusting to this pandemic in different, I would say, stages. So, when it first happened, you just want to respond to the crisis and want to settle down, make sure everything is stabilized, and then kind of get the business to a stable state. And then you slowly kind of, we're getting back to the groove. The customers maybe are looking for solutions to adjust, and how do you pivot? And then finally, I think we're at a stage where things are getting back to a little bit normal, or starting to. We cannot be in this state forever. And so then what do you do now? So I think and I talk about this. So when this pandemic first hit, very similar to, I think, Heather talked about making sure employees are settled. And so we communicated, internally what is expected. And I remember one of the first town hall that we did was about what the success looks like. And really the first one, like Arika said just now, is just to keeping you and your family safe. That's success. That's success. Okay. And, looking after your health and wellness, making sure you exercise every day, that's success. And then, of course, when we get into the phase of, thinking about, then we pivot back to, what can we do to the customer? And I think Heather talked about this. It is really insensitive to call a customer who is retrenching to say, can you buy some software? And so the conversation is, hey, how are you doing? How are you coping? Can I help you make better use of the technology you already bought? So we try to guide, also employees that they also deal with the customers with empathy, to be honest. I think we all need that. Mm-hmm. But that's how kind of we evolve the definition of success and how we measure, employees, or tell them you're doing great if you're doing these things. So I hope I answered the question.
Yes, thank you, Cecily. And we have our next question, which is, how do you keep your employees focused and motivated without risking micromanaging them? And that's for Heather.
I think there's two elements to this. And I know when COVID started, there were a lot of talks around how people had to log on every day with their cameras on so people could check in and make sure that you were actually at your desk, etc. I think that whole concept has gone away because studies have shown that productivity is actually increased during this time. And there's no need to micromanage and check in. I will say that was not something I practiced. It was something I read and heard in industry was happening. In terms of some of the things that I would look at is, one thing, focus on what you can control. And this is not just a COVID thing. I've said this to my team throughout, is there are certain things that are within your control. Let's work and see how we resolve those. And those that are out of your control, like an airline not being able to fly, there's nothing you can do other than try and support the customer as much as possible. So really about making sure that you reduce the noise and focus on what is within that employee's control. I think also in terms of micromanagement, it's celebrating the outcomes and the impact and making sure we focus on that versus what are they doing every hour, every minute. I honestly say I haven't worked in an organization that's done that. So I tend to be quite open, get things done. But if things are going awry, that's probably when you as a leader need to maybe double in and understand, okay, what's going on with this person? Are there family conditions? Are there certain customer scenarios? Are they going through a tough time personally? So I think it's also just to try and uncover sometimes where things aren't going the way they need to go and try and help support the individual through that.
Oh, that's great. Thank you, Heather. Arika, the next question is, do you have any advice on how to find the right balance between efficiency and productivity of remote meetings and, that sense of emotional intelligence and sense of connection?
That is a really great question. And I wish there was a magic bullet, sort of recipe that works for everyone. And I'll just share sort of what's been working for me and my team. And I think really is just taking the approach of, a human-centered approach and really sort of connecting with the team to ask them, like, what's working? How can we get better? And sort of, we have a cadence of doing retrospective sessions within the team. Recently, we've come up with a couple things because these are challenging times with so many back-to-back meetings. So, a couple guidelines that we sort of landed on as my immediate team, we needed more quiet time. So we've blocked a couple hours Tuesday mornings as well as Thursday afternoon because we need some time without meetings. And it's actually really important to have that time because you get more thinking done. It enables you to be more productive. So, blocking quiet time was one thing. Another thing was restructuring our stand-up meetings that we have. So we have the cadence of stand-ups, but restructuring them to be more productive, so that we don't feel so laden with meetings. And then also making sure that we have the right opportunities to connect as a team, informally, so that we can get that sense of connection. And in fact, in Singapore, some of the restrictions have lightened a bit, and we did have, in groups of 5, team dinner. It was the first time we've seen each other since Chinese New Year. But we did break up in groups of 5. The theory was if we all go to the same restaurant but different locations, we can have a bit of a shared experience. But those are some of the things that we've done, that I've done on my team to just sort of assess, what's working for us. How can we be more productive? How can we make the most use of our time and prioritize in the right way? I'm sure others, Heather and Cecily, have probably, tried and done other things to success as well.
Wow, absolutely. And Cecily, Heather, would you like to add anything to that?
I think maybe just this is a very practical tip, and it was said earlier, is in terms of in terms of just creating that connection, try and encourage the use of video. It really, really does help with that connection. I have sat on meetings where it's just people's icon and things like that, and their engagement and their involvement has been really, really low. So I think really encouraging video as one of the key scenarios to do that. I think also in this time, try and shorten meetings. I must admit, I'm finding the hour meeting too long for me. Even 45 minutes is pushing my attention span. So try and keep them to 30 minutes. I like the idea of blocking out space. I think, Arika, that's something I need to take from you personally, is block out thinking time. But I think shorten meetings, be very clear on the agenda and what the outcome is, and make sure you follow through afterwards.
Absolutely. Yeah. Cecily?
I think very similar. I try to not accept any meeting that's longer than 30 minutes unless it's from my boss, then, I have no choice. But honestly, that's what I'm trying to, if you can't finish it in 30 minutes, probably it's too long. But there's also something, I think culturally, I'm very conscious is to, if you are going to have, let's say 5-6 people in the meeting, you make sure that everybody feels is a good use of the time, meaning everybody contributes. And so I think you'll notice in meetings, and it's in physical as well, that some of the employees tend to be a bit more quiet. And so especially in a video setting, they may be like, I've just wasted 30 minutes of my time without saying anything. So I think be conscious about inviting input. It's also important.
Absolutely. Thank you, Cecily. And so moving on to the next question from the audience. During a financially conscious time, what are some of the ideas to drive motivation without involving too much cost? Heather, would you like to take that question?
Sure.
First.
This is so. Let me. I think there are a couple of things, and they might seem very obvious, but creating a recognition system that you can do. So Arika spoke about digitizing the awards. That wasn't a financial benefit. That was previously a physical award that was given to the team, which then became digital, so using gifts and things like that. So I think about recognition and reward. If you want maybe a small gift card, or depending on your corporate policies, those kinds of things are okay. But I think it's more about the recognition, and people just want to know that what they're doing is adding value and that they are on the right track. So I don't think it needs to be very expensive or cost anything at all. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And Arika, would you like to add anything to that?
I fully agree with Heather. I think that the element of, recognition and personalization is much more important than, something physical and the money that you're spending on it. And in fact, the carrot example that I was sharing earlier, we literally have a stuffed carrot that we bought at one of these shops in the local mall that we pass around. You don't actually get to take anything home, but it's really a moment of recognition and having everyone sort of focus on the contributions of that team member, and that sort of spirit can carry through into other types of fora, as well. It doesn't necessarily need to be, one small team meeting. There are other ways to recognize people even more broadly in bigger teams as well. So I do think that you just need to take that time to sort of, connect with your leaders to brainstorm a few ideas of what do people want. So and how can we, go beyond to take that moment to, motivate and recognize people.
Sorry, I do want to just weigh in. So one thing that we did do that only cost the organization a day was to recognize that mental health was important. And we actually had a Google Day off globally. And I think that was really well received, because it recognized that without taking out your leave, we needed time out. And it gave people a long weekend, because we did it on a Friday, and allowed people that time just to do what they needed to do or what they wanted to do at that time. So sorry to jump in.
No, absolutely. Thanks, Heather. Cecily, do you have anything to add to this?
No, I totally agree. Besides, when I saw the question, I was like, if someone knows the answer, I think my CFO would like to be in touch with you. But you know, I was just thinking the amount of travel expenses that we have saved during this period of time. But you know, back to the question, I totally agree with you know what Heather and Arika has shared, and I also feel like motivation can be achieved by you know when you know you can do the impossible or the really in really challenging times. So what we do a lot more is to kind of share like how people do it, how people cope. You know, I mean, we have like these small TED Talks internal. We call them Salesforce TED Talk, not TM, but that we just have, you know, someone to share, 15, 30 minutes of a story, either how they overcome personal challenges or they navigated a really difficult deal in this time. And so it's just good peer inspiration. Like, this is someone who has done it and, you can do it too. So we do that as well. I mean, on top of all the gifts, and even though my team will shoot me if I send them stuffed carrots, so I do have to send them something a bit more substantial. But yeah, you don't have to spend a lot of money on those things.
That's great. Thank you, Cecily. So moving on to our next question. Is full-time remote work viable in the long term, or are the benefits of informal office interactions far too valuable for business and individual success? Arika, would you like to take this one?
Sure. I think that's a great question from the audience. I think that we've all been, suddenly pushed into full-time remote work because of the pandemic. I think that the answer to this question is that it depends. There are studies that show that the types of jobs across industries that can be done remotely actually vary quite a bit. So education, for example, if you if you're older, certainly you can dial in and do that. But, there is still, people that are younger that don't know how to use computers, and that can be digitized. But, I come from an industry in consulting. Not all of the jobs can be done remotely. There are other types of industries where it's not sustainable to do all the jobs remotely. And I think that as a business leader, what you will see is that this remote working will play out differently for different industries. Not only for different industries, but for different roles, because there is value in connection. There's value in bringing people together to innovate, and there's this energy that you get when you're working together, on certain types of topics when you need to drive innovation as well. So I think that what's going to be more sustainable in the longer term is for business leaders to assess what works best for their teams. What works best for their broader organization, and then also look at individual context. Studies show that for those that have families that they need to tend to at home, they have varied levels of ability to work from home. There are also people that maybe they are single and they really value that connection that they get with people in the workplace. And so their acceptance of, a longer term working arrangement might not necessarily work well for them. On the converse, there are people that are potentially, you might have a workforce where where you have some employees that are disabled and you value the flexibility of working remotely more. So what's sustainable longer term is really thinking about what will work for individuals as well as a broader organization.
That's great, Arika. Thank you. Heather, would you like to add anything? And Cecily?
I think I'll let Cecily go. I can't add anything. I think Arika's covered most of it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I don't think the physical interaction will be completely replaced. It's just going to, I think, change. And as with anything, we have to think about how we adapt and what's the skills, what is the, kind of the quality you need to succeed in this kind of a new world, as we say.
Great, thank you all. So this brings us to our last question for today. would you see business as usual after COVID-19? And if not, what will be the greatest change for leaders? And this is to all of you. So, Arika, would you like to take this one first?
I think that we're not going back to a business as usual. I think it's instead of a new normal, it's a never normal. There was no playbook for the pandemic. And I think that it's very difficult to predict what's going to happen in terms of, will there be second waves? Will it be, how is the economy going to adjust? How is business demand going to adjust? And I think that as leaders, we just have to be ready to reassess our strategies and evolve and take stock as we need to and be more agile in the way that we're working with our teams, working with our customers, and be more flexible.
Absolutely. Thank you, Arika. Cecily, would you like to give your thoughts?
Yeah, well, there are, if you kind of go to the internet, I think you can find a lot of articles trying to predict what the post-COVID world would look like, what the implications to business. But I think in reality, nobody really knows, and we do not know when is this going to, either we are totally going to come out of it, or it's going to be there somehow, that's the virus is still out there and it may come back, if you've seen in some countries, you thought that it's under control, but, it is not. But I think, the greatest change, I think the question for leaders, and I think for all businesses, is that, we used to joke that in the past, the biggest change agent in a company is the CEO or the CTO or, the chief innovation officer. And then now it's COVID, because you don't have a choice anymore. So you have to transform, you have to change. The business model will be impacted, the supply chain will be impacted, the way we do business will be impacted, the skill set required from employees will be impacted. So there's going to be massive change, and there's acceleration of some of these trends already started pre-COVID. So I do agree with Arika, is we are still trying to kind of adjust, but is to be agile, to adapt, lead with empathy, like we say, that's the way, I think, for us to continue to figure it out.
Yeah, thank you, Cecily. And Heather, what are your thoughts on this?
So I think there's two elements to this, and I think the way we work will not be the same. But I think there will be multiple trends that emerge and new technologies or new ways of engaging. And if you will indulge me a little bit from a tech perspective, things that we're already starting to see are things like the traditional insurance broker who used to go from door to door to door. They will move to in some scenarios, start moving to an online world where no longer do you have to go, they have to travel from door to door. They will start using video conferencing as a medium and a way to get contracts done. So I think we will see the emergence of some of these technologies, which have been there for, I've been using video conferencing for at least 5 or 6 years, probably longer. But people haven't adopted them because they wanted the personal touch. COVID has shown that you can still keep a connection and then get business done through these scenarios. So I think we're going to see technology or this kind of technology and remote engagement becoming far more real in terms of how we do business. So telehealth's another one. Like we've been working with a hospital in Taiwan, looking at how they not just provide telemedicine, but continue to teach doctors. Because one of the biggest problems that they had during COVID is they couldn't take interns or residents into a hospital room to teach them, because there was the risk of the disease spreading amongst not only the students, but other patients. So using technology to do remote learning, remote medicine, those kinds of things are going to start becoming a lot more real. And we'll see the adoption of that accelerating. And then to the second part of the question, obviously my answer is no, it won't be business as usual. I think as leaders, we need to start, if we're not already, looking at outcomes and impact-based measurements of our teams, allow flexibility. I think it will start bringing in previously, and I've spoken about this to a couple of people, is previously women who didn't re-enter the workforce because they had family responsibilities. I think we'll start seeing some of those people returning to the workforce if they allowed flexibility to manage their life. So I think the biggest thing is leaders can allow flexibility and allow for impact-based measurement versus just the hours, etc., and time in the office.
Great. Thank you all so much. This has been absolutely amazing. We've heard some great insights from you all today. Staying connected, the new technologies coming into play, and just being adaptable and flexible with this new time. We know we can't predict how the pandemic will play out over the coming months, but as we've learned today, if we face up to the challenge, we may just change our workplaces and households for the better. So with that, I would like to thank our panelists for sharing all your insights and spending your time with us here today. Thank you to Google for hosting the session as well. And thank you to the audience for joining us today as well. So with that, we're going to sign off, and that's over to you, Jenny.
Thank you, Hema, and all the speakers today, and also the great questions and participation from the audience. Without knowing, we have reached the end of our first Thinking with Leaders session. Personally, I am energized and have learned a lot after hearing from all the speakers. I want to thank the speakers and all of you for sharing your precious time to discuss leading with empathy and fostering connections during these unprecedented times. We're constantly looking for ways to improve, so please take our survey in the event description, where you can also let us know your suggestions for the next session in October. We hope to see you. Thank you again for joining us, and meanwhile, take care and stay safe.